Are you sure you want that on record? My manager's voice was smooth. Too smooth. The kind of polished calm that corporate people use when they're issuing a warning but don't want it to sound like one. I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room on the 19th floor of Everlight Energy, hands on my laptop, a faint coffee stain on my sleeve. It was 8:47 a.m. on a Monday, just another routine meeting for the environmental compliance team. But the question I asked, about the discrepancy between the raw emissions data and what appeared in the final report, was one I'd been preparing for all week. Yes, I said. Because it's part of the project record. And if we claim to be green, we should start with being honest. No one backed me up. Not even with a glance. The next morning, my inbox had a single message. Envelope with arrow subject, temporary suspension of duties. Reason? Breach of internal protocol and premature discussion of unvalidated data. 4 days later, another email. Envelope with arrow subject, termination of employment. We thank you for your contributions. We wish you success in your future endeavors. I sat in my apartment. No sound but the hum of the fridge. Just me, my laptop, and the same emissions file I had reviewed a dozen times. The one that showed Everlight's real output was 4 times higher than what they'd reported to the EPA. I thought of their marketing slogans. The future is clean. We believe in transparency. Everlight leads the ethical energy revolution. And I knew the truth. They didn't want transparency. They wanted silence. And I was the one who broke it. Everything I'd built, my career, my credibility, my security, vanished with a single click. Worse? So did the people. Colleagues ghosted me. One even blocked me. My ex, who still worked there, scrubbed every trace of me from his socials. A friend texted me. Leah, I respect you, but, really? Couldn't you have just stayed quiet and done your job? That's when I realized. To them, I went too far. To myself, it was the first time I hadn't. But here's what no one tells you about the truth. It doesn't explode. It doesn't change the world overnight. At first. It just breaks you. I wasn't supposed to end up in energy. When I was 14, I wanted to be a forest ranger. At 17, a climate change documentary changed everything. By 19, I was volunteering for a conservation group in Oregon, hiking muddy hills and collecting air samples in the rain. I didn't care about the pay. I cared about impact. That never changed. I studied environmental engineering at UC Berkeley. Graduated early. Won a fellowship. Did my thesis on emissions control systems. I was the one who believed that science, combined with conviction, could fix things. I still do. That's what made Everlight feel like fate. They weren't just another energy company, at least, not back then. They ran ads during the Super Bowl, showed wind turbines spinning against pink skies, kids planting trees, and captions like, "We're not just lighting cities. We're lighting the way forward." It didn't even feel like a job interview. They called it a values alignment session. I was 26, idealistic, and honestly, I bought every word. My first day on the job, my manager gave me a welcome binder that said, "Sustainability isn't a department. It's our foundation." I stayed late every night. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I wanted to. I designed internal audit protocols. Improved emission tracking models. I helped rewrite the compliance handbook for 6 regions. I wasn't just a good employee. I was a believer. Over the next 9 years, I moved up. Slowly. Not because I played politics, I didn't. But because I worked harder than most people around me. And then came the Evergreen Project. It was supposed to be Everlight's crown jewel, a flagship site powered 90% by renewables, with zero local water impact and a full transparency initiative. I was assigned to it 6 months before launch. It was the biggest opportunity of my career. And the beginning of the end. At first, the problems were small. A report here. A late reading there. Nothing sinister. Just delays. But when I noticed the sulfur dioxide readings being manually adjusted, I knew it wasn't just a glitch. I flagged it. Nicely. The email was ignored. Then I brought it up in a meeting. Suddenly, I wasn't being included in project updates anymore. I told myself I was overreacting. That I didn't have the full picture. But the data didn't lie. I cross-referenced the scrubber system's input-output rates. The actual emissions were over 400% higher than the public report claimed. I knew what that meant. Legally. Ethically. Personally. And still, I waited. Waited for someone else to say something. No one did. So I did. And it cost me everything. But that's the thing about faith. You don't lose it all at once. You lose it in pieces. Until one day, you're standing in the wreckage of everything you believed in, and you realize. You still have yourself. The first red flag was a missing timestamp. It was subtle, buried inside a daily output summary from the Evergreen facility. A 2 a.m. sulfur dioxide reading was just blank. No sensor error. No explanation. Just gone. I flagged it. Again. Got a reply from the data coordinator. That slot's being reviewed. Probably just a bad node ping. It wasn't. 3 days later, the same report reappeared, this time, with a reading filled in. But it was too clean. Too perfect. Almost engineered. I opened the raw data log from the remote sensors. The real number at 2 a.m.? 387 ppm. That's 4 times the EPA limit for that facility class. The report? 83. That wasn't a typo. That was manipulation. I printed everything. Spread it out across my kitchen table like a forensic puzzle. I cross-checked flow rates, turbine efficiency logs, backup scrubber reports. Pattern after pattern. Every time the real numbers exceeded legal limits, the reports were corrected. Every single time. It had been happening for at least 5 months. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, asking myself over and over. What do I do with this? Because I already knew what would happen if I went to HR. Or legal. Or even my manager. The last engineer who flagged an inconsistency in 2019? Transferred to a satellite facility in rural Texas. 2 months later, laid off. I was still naive back then. I thought it was a coincidence. Now I knew better. The next day, I took a different route. I documented everything. Created a full internal report, annotated every change, included side-by-side comparisons of raw versus reported values. I emailed it to myself. Twice. Then, I scheduled a one-on-one with my manager. He showed up late. Coffee in hand. Looked at me like I was being dramatic. Leah, no one's trying to hide anything. There's just a difference between compliance and storytelling. You're calling false reporting a story? He leaned back. I'm saying you're too smart to miss the bigger picture. We're entering a funding cycle. This project has visibility. You know how many jobs are riding on its success. And what happens if the EPA finds out? He didn't flinch. They won't. Unless someone tells them. My hands were cold. My jaw locked. He smiled. Look. You're brilliant. You care. That's why we hired you. But this? He tapped the stack of printed reports. This isn't the hill you want to die on. But here's the thing. He was wrong. This was exactly the hill. I didn't walk out of that meeting angry. I walked out clear. I went straight to my desk. Closed the blinds. Logged into my personal email and downloaded the full internal report. Then I opened the company's ethics portal, the anonymous whistleblower system they bragged about during onboarding. There it was. Your report has been submitted. Case number 49077. Please retain your confirmation code. I took a screenshot. Saved it to an encrypted folder on a flash drive I wore around my neck. Then I went home. And waited. 2 days later, I was summoned to HR. This is just a check-in, they said. Some of your recent behavior raised concerns about team morale. They used soft voices. Smiled too much. We're all on the same side here, Leah. But sometimes, passionate employees forget the chain of communication. Are you aware, I said slowly, that you're addressing someone who used your exact process for ethical reporting? Silence. HR rep number 1 shifted in her chair. HR rep number 2 folded her hands. We can't discuss pending internal matters. But we do advise focusing on your own deliverables during this transition. I walked out knowing 2 things. They weren't going to investigate anything. They were preparing to make me the problem. The following Monday, I was placed on temporary administrative leave. No reason. No documentation. Just a cold, clinical email signed leadership team. And then, came the calls. Or rather, the non-calls. My coworkers, silent. The Slack channel, dead. Even my manager, the one who told me I was brilliant, blocked me. I checked LinkedIn. My name was already off the org chart. Just like that. Erased. A week later, they made it official. Employment terminated, violation of conduct standards. It wasn't just cruel. It was tactical. They didn't want a scene. They wanted isolation. No press. No lawsuit. Just quiet. But I wasn't afraid of being fired. I was afraid of being forgotten. I remember sitting on my apartment floor that night, surrounded by printouts, my laptop, and a cold pad thai I couldn't eat. I could have stopped there. Let them bury it. Move to another city. Pretend it didn't happen. But I thought of the air monitors I'd installed myself. The kids who lived downwind of the plant. The forests that couldn't file reports or hire lawyers. And I realized. I wasn't the victim. I was the witness. And if I disappeared, so would the truth. No one prepares you for what happens after you speak up. It's not just the job you lose. It's your place in the world. The morning after my termination, I woke up at 6:12 a.m., like I still had a reason to be awake. I made coffee out of habit. Sat at my kitchen counter staring at the Everlight Cares mug they'd given me at the last company retreat. The irony was almost poetic. I tossed it into the trash. It shattered against a yogurt container. Good. For the next few days, I lived in a kind of quiet I'd never known. The kind where your phone doesn't ring. Where no one checks in. Where your email inbox is just spam and newsletters you don't remember subscribing to. My landlord called to confirm rent. My mom left a voicemail. If this was really about pollution, wouldn't the government already know? And just like that, I understood why so few people speak up. Because when you do, the silence around you becomes deafening. I tried applying for jobs. At smaller firms. Clean tech startups. Companies I once would have turned down. Nothing. One interview went well, until the hiring manager asked about the gap in my resume. I told him the truth. His smile faded. Oh. You were that Everlight engineer. He closed the folder. I think we'll go in a different direction. My savings ticked downward. Week by week. I canceled my gym membership. Started rationing groceries. Said no to dinner invites I couldn't afford anyway. The loneliness wasn't just social. It was existential. Who was I, if I wasn't the good engineer? The overachiever. The problem solver. Was I just the woman who caused trouble? One night, I got a message from a former colleague. Someone I'd mentored. Someone I thought had my back. Hey. Just so you know, people think you overplayed your hand. You made the company look bad. That's why no one's talking to you. I stared at the screen. Not because I was shocked. But because, deep down, I had feared exactly that. They didn't see me as brave. They saw me as radioactive. But something inside me refused to let go. Not pride. Not even hope. Just this small, stubborn ember of conviction. I hadn't lied. I hadn't exaggerated. And if doing the right thing made me an outcast, then maybe it was time to stop asking permission to exist. The first thing I did was print everything again. Every email. Every flagged report. Every annotated spreadsheet. I organized them by date, color-coded the falsified data entries, and bound them into a 93-page document labeled Everlight Emissions, Internal Report versus Filed Claims. The second thing I did was call someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Marisol Vega, an environmental attorney I'd met at a conference in Denver, back when I was still idealistic enough to think networking could save the planet. She picked up on the second ring. Leah? Is everything okay? I told her everything. Not just about the data, about the cover-up, the HR meetings, the erasure. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. I need to see the documents. Tonight. At 10:43 p.m., I sent her the drive. At 6:12 a.m., she replied. This is serious. And yes, illegal. But whistleblower cases are hell. Are you ready for that? I stared at the screen. Was I? No. Not really. But the alternative, doing nothing, felt worse. I'm in. We filed a formal report with the EPA's Office of Inspector General. Marisol handled the language. I handled the facts. It was airtight. But we both knew the process could take months. Or longer. And Everlight? They had lawyers. Lobbyists. PR machines. I had, truth. And a lawyer with a spine. So I took the next step. There was one place I hadn't gone yet, the press. Not just any press. Investigative reporters. The kind who don't flinch when billion-dollar companies threaten lawsuits. Through Marisol, I got in touch with a journalist named Sloan Ramirez at the Frontier Ledger. I sent a redacted version of my report. She called me within 2 hours. If this is real, she said, we're looking at one of the biggest greenwashing scandals of the decade. It's real. Then we need to talk. In person. Off the record, for now. We met at a coffee shop just outside Oakland. I wore sunglasses, like I was someone important. It felt ridiculous. Sloan wasn't what I expected. She was young. Sharp. And already knew the Everlight board by name. We talked for 3 hours. When I handed her the full report, she said. You just handed me a loaded weapon. I nodded. Use it wisely. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Voicemail. I listened in the car. Miss Sanders. This is Roger Lynn from Huxley Equity. I came across your name in connection with the Everlight situation. I'd like to discuss an opportunity if you're open to consulting. Independent, of course. I stared at the phone. My pulse kicked. It had begun. The article dropped on a Thursday morning. Headline. The Green Lie, Inside Everlight Energy's Emissions Cover-Up. Front page. Above the fold. My name, not anonymous. I'd made the choice. And now it was out there. The story went viral within hours. Terms like toxic air laundering and green optics fraud started trending on environmental blogs, then on Reddit, and eventually cable news. Sloan had done her homework. She'd confirmed the data. Interviewed other former employees, some who'd quietly left years ago but had never spoken up. Now, they were ready. The article included internal memos, graphs, timestamps. And one quote from me. They didn't just mislead the public. They poisoned it and told us to smile. My phone lit up with messages I hadn't expected. People I hadn't heard from in months. Former colleagues. Old professors. Even the friend who once told me I'd overplayed my hand. Leah, I'm sorry. I had no idea. But one message stood out. It was from my ex. I read the article. You were right. I didn't have your courage. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Some silences deserve to stay that way. By the end of the week, I was getting interview requests. NPR. Vice. BBC Earth. A sustainability summit in Vancouver wanted me to keynote. But I didn't say yes to any of it. Not yet. Because something else had started moving, quietly, underneath the noise. Clients. Real ones. Huxley Equity, the private firm that left the voicemail. They weren't bluffing. They had divested from Everlight that same morning. And now, they needed someone they could trust to lead an independent audit of their next investment in clean energy. And they wanted me. I didn't have a firm. I didn't have a team. I didn't even have a website. But I had credibility. And numbers. That was enough. I called Marisol. I think I need to start something. Like what? A company. Not just reporting violations, helping build systems that don't need to hide. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said. Then let's build it. From the ground up. And that night, with nothing but a busted laptop and a bulletproof mission, I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed. Verdeline Analytics. No office. No business cards. No playbook. Just a woman who told the truth. And was finally being heard. Starting a company sounds impressive. It's not. At least not at first. It's emailing people from a Gmail address because you don't have a domain name yet. It's Zoom calls with your cat in the background because your office is your living room. It's eating peanut butter on toast 3 days in a row because you're too stressed to cook. But it's yours. And that makes all the difference. I called it Verdeline Analytics. Verde, for green. Line, for drawing one. Clear. Uncrossable. We wouldn't just expose dirty energy. We'd build the blueprint for something cleaner. Smarter. Real. No bloated PR teams. No legal scare tactics. Just the truth, in numbers. My first client was Huxley Equity. They needed an audit of a geothermal facility in Arizona, fast. They flew me out. Put me up in a motel with flickering lights. I didn't care. I worked from 6 a.m. to midnight for 6 straight days. Ran every test myself. Checked every valve. Cross-referenced every emissions log with live output. When I delivered the report, the lead investor stared at me. This is ruthless. It's honest, I replied. He nodded. We'll be using you again. From there, it snowballed. A tech startup in Austin. A coastal wind farm in Oregon. A food production company trying to transition to zero-waste operations. They didn't come because I was the cheapest. They came because they were tired of lies. Because they didn't want another Everlight scandal on their hands. I hired Marisol as legal counsel. Then brought in a data scientist I used to work with. Then a field engineer. Then an assistant who used to manage Everlight's front desk, and quit the day my article dropped. My little team. My people. All of us ex-somethings, turned into something more. We moved into a co-working space with bad Wi-Fi and leaky windows. But we had whiteboards. And purpose. And slowly, the name Verdeline started showing up on industry panels. In pitch decks. In recommendation chains. People weren't just hiring us. They were trusting us. And I remembered something my therapist once said, back when I still had insurance. Reputation isn't what people say about you in the room. It's what they whisper when you're not there. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of what they were whispering. The email came in at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Subject line. Immediate termination of contract, per legal review. Client, Solterra Labs. A solar tech startup we'd been working with for 6 weeks. Their reasoning? Unforeseen conflicts with partner interests. No further communication necessary. I called my contact there. No answer. I checked LinkedIn. Solterra had just announced a strategic partnership with Everlight Energy. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. They couldn't stop me through legal channels. So they started whispering behind closed doors. She's a liability. She's difficult. She's radioactive. Same playbook. Different stage. But what they didn't realize was, I'd already played that game. And won. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and updated our proposal tracker. 3 contracts in negotiation. 2 awaiting review. 1 massive RFP from an international investor that could triple our size overnight. I wasn't worried about Solterra. They'd figure it out, eventually. But I did start hearing murmurs. Small clients suddenly going quiet. A community board invitation postponed. A conference appearance pulled due to budget. It was a soft blacklist. And it meant only one thing. We'd hit a nerve. I told the team during our Friday meeting. They waited for me to be angry. Panicked. Instead, I smiled. Good. Let them come. Maggie, our data lead, raised an eyebrow. So what's the move? We don't move. We double down. I pointed to the screen behind me. Verdeline isn't a company. It's a correction. The following Monday, we submitted the RFP to Ardent Capital, one of the largest clean infrastructure investors in the world. It was a long shot. But then, they called. The head of ESG initiatives, a woman named Kendall, wanted a meeting. I flew to New York with my scrappiest blazer and a folder full of annotated reports. We met in a boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough glass to remind me of Everlight. But Kendall? She didn't blink. I've read every word of the Frontier Ledger article. You know what I liked most? I stayed silent. She leaned forward. You never made it about revenge. Just accountability. That's rare. Then she slid the contract across the table. 6 figures. Multi-year. Flagship client. We shook hands. And just like that, Verdeline moved out of the shadows. A week later, I got an alert. Everlight Energy stock had dropped 11%. The EPA had opened a second investigation. Sloan Ramirez was nominated for a journalism award. And my inbox? Full. But this time, with respect. 1 year later, I stood on a stage in San Francisco, staring out at a ballroom filled with energy executives, regulators, founders, and analysts. The backdrop behind me read: Sustainability Forward, Rethinking Environmental Leadership. I was the keynote. Funny how things turn. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. Not after being erased. Not after watching my reputation weaponized. Not after building a company out of the ashes they left behind. Now, I just felt steady. The lights dimmed. The room quieted. And I began. I'm not here today because I played the game well. I'm here because I refuse to lie. A year ago, I lost my job for pointing out a data discrepancy. But let's be honest, I didn't lose my job because of one question. I lost it because I was inconvenient. Because I made it harder to pretend. Because I told the truth. I paused. Let it settle. Then. But here's the part Everlight never understood. You can bury a person. But if that person is a seed, all you've done is plant her. After the applause, I stepped off stage and walked straight into a circle of people I'd once admired from afar. Some nodded in respect. Some looked away. And one, the former Everlight VP of Compliance, actually reached out a hand. You built something remarkable, Lia. I shook it. But I didn't thank him. Because he wasn't the reason I'd built it. I was. Today, Verdeline Analytics has 4 full-time teams across 2 coasts. We've audited over 90 facilities across 6 countries. Our reports are cited in 3 ongoing policy reviews. But I don't measure success in numbers. I measure it in silence. Not the silence of fear. The silence that comes when there's nothing to hide. Sometimes people still ask if I think it was worth it. If I regret it. And I tell them. I didn't get here because I was brave. I got here because I ran out of ways to stay quiet. And when I finally used my voice, the right people heard it. Outside my office now, there's a plaque on the wall. It doesn't have my name. It just says, accountability is a renewable resource. And every time I walk past it, I smile. Not because I won. But because I never stopped telling the truth. Even when no one wanted to hear it.